Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The rain drummed against the kitchen window like restless fingers, each drop tracing a path down the glass that mirrored the tears Elena had shed just hours before. She stood at the stove, mechanically stirring the pasta sauce, her mind 1,000 miles away from the simple act of preparing dinner. The house felt cavernous without Michael's presence, and the silence between the thunderclaps seemed to whisper all the words they'd never said to each other. When the doorbell rang at 7:30, Elena's heart lurched. For a wild moment, she thought it might be Michael, coming home early from his business trip with flowers and apologies. But as she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Standing there, drenched from the storm, was David, Michael's younger brother, holding a bottle of wine and wearing that familiar, slightly crooked smile that had always made her pulse quicken in ways she'd never dared acknowledge. "I hope I'm not intruding," David said, his voice carrying that warm undertone that seemed to wrap around her like a comfortable blanket. "Michael mentioned you'd be alone tonight, and I thought you might like some company." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the door handle. She should have said no. She should have made polite excuses and sent him away. But the loneliness had been eating at her for weeks, and David's presence felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Come in," she heard herself say, stepping aside to let him enter. "You're soaked. Let me get you a towel." As David shrugged out of his jacket, Elena couldn't help but notice how the rain had molded his shirt to his shoulders, how his dark hair curled slightly when wet. She forced herself to look away, focusing instead on the simple act of hospitality. This was Michael's brother, her brother-in-law. Nothing more. But as the evening unfolded, Elena found herself remembering why she'd always felt so comfortable around David. Unlike Michael, who had grown distant and preoccupied with work over the past year, David listened when she spoke. He asked about her art, her dreams, the novel she'd been writing in secret. His eyes never glazed over with that polite disinterest she'd grown accustomed to seeing in her husband's face. "Michael doesn't know about the book," Elena admitted over dinner, surprised by her own honesty. The wine had loosened her tongue, but it was more than that. David had a way of making her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in months. "Why not?" David asked, leaning forward slightly. A candlelight flickered across his features, casting shadows that made him look older, more serious. "From what you've told me, it sounds incredible." Elena set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "He wouldn't understand. He thinks writing is just a hobby, something to fill time until I get serious about starting a family." The words tasted bitter on her tongue. "Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers who I was before we got married." David's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Elena saw something flash in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or frustration. "You're not just Michael's wife," he said quietly. "You're Elena. You're brilliant and talented and passionate about things that matter. Anyone who can't see that is." He stopped himself, but Elena could hear the unfinished words hanging in the air between them. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths, until David reached across the table and touched her hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have said that. It's just, you deserve to be happy, Elena. Really happy." The warmth of his touch sent electricity shooting up her arm, and Elena found herself staring at their joined hands. David's fingers were long and graceful, so different from Michael's broader, more practical hands. When was the last time her husband had touched her like this? When was the last time he'd looked at her with such genuine care? "David," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "I know this is complicated. I know we shouldn't." He trailed off, his thumb moving in small circles against her knuckles. But I can't stop thinking about you, Elena. About us. About what we could be if things were different. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She should have pulled her hand away, should have reminded him that she was married to his brother, that this conversation was dangerous territory. But the truth was, she'd been thinking about it too. The way David's eyes lingered on her face when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he always seemed to find excuses to visit when Michael was traveling. The way he made her feel alive in ways she'd almost forgotten were possible. Things aren't different, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm married, David. To your brother. Are you happy? He asked, his eyes searching hers. Really happy. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're drowning, and Michael doesn't even notice. The question hit her like a physical blow. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, and she finally pulled her hand away from David's. She stood abruptly, walking to the window where the rain continued its relentless assault on the glass. It's not that simple, she said, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened window. Marriage isn't always about happiness. Sometimes it's about commitment, about working through the hard times. David rose from his chair, and Elena could feel him approaching even before his reflection appeared beside hers in the window. He stood, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. And what about love? He asked softly. What about feeling cherished and understood? What about having someone who sees your dreams as important as their own? Elena closed her eyes, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. Don't do this, she whispered. Please don't make me choose. I'm not asking you to choose, David said, his voice gentle but firm. I'm asking you to be honest. With me and with yourself. What do you want, Elena? Not what you think you should want, or what everyone expects you to want. What do you actually want? The question hung in the air between them, and Elena felt something inside her chest crack open. For months, she'd been going through the motions of her life, playing the role of the dutiful wife, the supportive partner, the woman who was supposed to be grateful for her comfortable suburban existence. But what did she want? She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be heard. She wanted someone to ask about her writing, not because they felt obligated, but because they genuinely cared about her thoughts and dreams. She wanted to feel desired, not just needed. She wanted to remember what it felt like to be truly alive. I want. She began, then stopped, afraid to give voice to the desires that had been growing inside her like seeds in fertile soil. David moved closer, and Elena could see his face reflected in the window, his expression tender and patient. Tell me, he said. I want to feel like I matter, she whispered. Like I'm more than just a convenience, more than just someone to keep the house running and smile at dinner parties. I want to feel like I'm someone's priority, not just their afterthought. David's reflection smiled sadly. You are someone's priority, he said. You're mine. Elena turned to face him, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. They stood there for a long moment, the rain creating a cocoon of intimacy around. Them, the rest of the world fading away until there was nothing but the space between them and the choice that hung there like a bridge she was afraid to cross. This is wrong, she said, but even as she spoke the words, she felt herself leaning toward him. Is it? David asked, his hand rising to cup her cheek. Is it wrong to want to be happy? Is it wrong to want to be with someone who sees you for who you really are? Elena's resolve crumbled as David's thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. She thought about Michael, probably in his hotel room right now, focused on his presentations and profit margins, not giving her a second thought. She thought about the conversation they'd had before he left, when she tried to tell him about her writing and he dismissed it with a distracted nod, and a comment about dinner plans. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I," David replied. "But we're already hurting, Elena. We're both hurting. And pretending we don't feel this way isn't going to make it stop." Elena felt herself nodding, even as part of her screamed that this was a mistake. But David's touch felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she'd lost without even realizing it was missing. "What happens now?" she asked, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. "Now," David said, leaning down until his forehead rested against hers, "we stop pretending. We stop lying to ourselves about what we want. We stop sacrificing our happiness for other people's expectations." Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally admitting to herself what she'd been denying for so long. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," David said, his lips brushing against her temple. "But I'm more scared of living the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." Elena pulled back slightly to look at him, studying his face as if she was seeing him for the first time. In many ways, she was. This wasn't Michael's younger brother, the charming bachelor who showed up for family dinners and holiday gatherings. This was David, the man who remembered her birthday when her own husband forgot, who asked about her dreams and listened to her answers, who made her feel like she was worth loving. "We can't go back from this," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. "I don't want to go back," David replied. "Do you?" Elena thought about her marriage, about the slow erosion of intimacy and connection, about the way she'd been disappearing piece by piece into a life that felt more like a prison than a partnership. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who believed in love and passion, and the possibility of finding someone who would see her soul and love it completely. "No," she said, surprised by the strength in her voice. "I don't want to go back." David's smile was like sunrise, warming her from the inside out. "Then we move forward," he said. "Together." As David's lips met hers, Elena felt something inside. Her chest unfurled like a flower reaching toward the sun. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid the moment might shatter if they moved too quickly. But as Elena responded, threading her fingers through his hair and pulling him closer, the kiss deepened, becoming something desperate and hungry, and full of all the longing they'd been carrying in silence. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena rested her forehead against David's chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, the rain slowing to a gentle patter against the windows. "What happens when Michael comes home?" she asked, voicing the question that had been hovering at the edge of her consciousness. David's arms tightened around her. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together. I'm not going anywhere, Elena. Not unless you ask me to." Elena lifted her head to look at him, seeing in his eyes the same mixture of hope and fear that she felt in her own heart. "I don't want you to go," she said. "I want you to stay. I want to see where this leads. Even if it's complicated," David asked. "Even if it means difficult conversations and hurt feelings and having to rebuild our lives from scratch." Elena thought about the alternative. Going back to her empty marriage, pretending she didn't feel this connection, slowly suffocating under the weight of unspoken desires and unfulfilled dreams. The thought made her chest tighten with panic. "Especially then," she said. "I've been living in the shadows for so long, David. I want to step into the light, even if it's blinding at first." David's smile was radiant and he spun her around. In a circle, both of them laughing despite the gravity of what they'd just decided. When he set her down, Elena felt lighter than she had in years. as if she'd been carrying a heavy burden without realizing it, and had finally been given permission to set it down. "I love you," David said, the words tumbling out as if he'd been holding them back for years. "I've loved you since the first time Michael brought you home for dinner, and I've been fighting it ever since because I thought it was wrong, thought I was betraying him. But I can't fight it anymore." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes again. But these were tears of joy, of recognition, of finally hearing the words she'd been longing to hear without even knowing it. "I love you too," she whispered back, and saying it felt like breaking free from chains she'd been wearing for so long she'd forgotten they were there. As they stood there in the candlelit kitchen, holding each other while the storm cleared outside, Elena knew that everything was about to change. There would be difficult conversations ahead, painful moments of truth, the complex work of untangling one life and building another. But for the first time in years, she felt hope blooming in her, just like a garden in spring. She thought about the novel she'd been writing, the story of a woman who'd lost herself in the expectations of others, and had to fight to find her way back to who she really was. Perhaps it was time to stop writing about courage and start living it. "So," David said, pulling back slightly to look at her, "what do we do now?" Elena smiled, feeling more certain than she had about anything in years. "Now," she said, "we begin." Outside, the last of the storm clouds drifted away, revealing a sky full of stars. And inside the warm kitchen, two people who had found each other at last stood on the threshold of a new chapter, ready to write their own love story, one honest moment at a time. The dinner dishes sat forgotten on the table, the candles burned low in their holders, and somewhere in the distance, a phone began to ring. But for now, in this moment, Elena and David had everything they needed. Each other, the courage to choose love over convenience, and the hope that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the bravest decisions. As Elena reached over to turn off the phone, she caught David's eye and smiled. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. And that, she realized, was worth everything.